Working with color just a little bit more, we need to define a bit more on what the difference between foreground color and background color. So when we use our foreground color, which is the top color, that color is used for painting, for typical fills. And if I make a new layer and I use a paintbrush, it's going to paint what my foreground color is. Okay? If I'm on a background layer and I use the eraser tool, let me increase my brush size. I'm actually using the square bracket key, which is after the letter P on the keyboard. There are the square bracket, and those allow me to increase and decrease brush sizes. When I use the eraser tool, I will use my background color. So there are different times when your foreground background color will be used. Now by default, my foreground color is black and my background color is white. Right now I have a green foreground color with a white background. To reset this to the default, I just need to press D on the keyboard. D on the keyboard will reset it to the default. I do have a little quick key here, or a little icon that I can click as well to default to foreground and background colors. Black for the foreground, white for the background. If I choose to switch these, I can use the switch foreground and background colors, or the X. X will switch my foreground and background colors. We also have a couple of other tools here that might be helpful in doing some editing with color. So we have an eyedropper tool. The eyedropper tool basically is a sampling tool. And so when I click, I'm able to sample, and notice my foreground color is changing. I'm changing to the color that I'm clicking on. Now you do have some different sample sizes, so sampling is just using an existing color. I choose to keep it at point sample because that is then the color in the pixel that I directly click on. If I choose to do an average, it'll do an average pixel area. For instance, my 5 by 5 average would look at 5 pixels by 5 pixels, sort of a matrix underneath my cursor, and choose a color from that. I tend to like exactly where I click. Okay? And then you can choose if you want to sample on all layers or to limit that. All right, one other thing, once I've sampled up a color, let me go back to my layer 1. I can use my paint bucket tool, which hides underneath my gradient, and I can fill it. So by using that paint bucket, it will fill an entire area. Or if I have a selection and use my paint bucket tool, it will fill within that selected area. And I'm doing an Ctrl Z. Actually, we'll just go ahead and delete this layer because we don't need that. And a Control D to delete my selection. Okay. One other thing, back to that eyedropper, I want to show a really nice panel that helps work with color under Window and Info. So this Info panel gives me information on what's directly underneath of my cursor. It tells me my XY location with, of course, my 0, 0 point is up in my top. You can see I'm close. My 0, 0 is in the top left. But any other, what's ever underneath. Now I have something interesting happening here. If you can see the very small numbers, the RGB color that's directly under my cursor right now is 178, 192, 156. Now if you look over on the right side, it says RGB, but I'm getting B2CO9C. That's my hex number. So it's giving me a hex number, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail later. If I want to change that, I can go to Panel Options and I can change first color readout, second color readout. So this is the first color and this is the second. So I can change that from web color to CMYK, HSB, any of those color modes that we've talked about. One other tool that we have hiding under the eyedropper is the Color Sampler tool. The Color Sampler tool allows me to take 4 samples of color. So you can see that I'm clicking in different areas and I'm getting a little bit of a target with a number. And my colors at that point are being stored here in the info panel. I can only have 4, which is kind of you know, limiting at some points, but that allows me to sample up and I can move those so that I can get right on a specific color to see what that color is. So just some general tools working with color. Next we'll talk about the color picker.